For joining us. On behalf of everybody here at the bookstore and our owner, Mitchell Kaplan, back there, we welcome you. Yes, you can clap for that. Yes, thank you. Of course, we know we couldn't do this without you. We figured the other day that over the last 42 years of business, we've done over 20,000 events like this. I think we've done at least 20,000 with Dave, so we really appreciate you being here. If you have any questions about anything that goes on in any of our locations, you can go to our website at booksandbooks.com. We will send you an email every 20 to 30 seconds or so if you give us your email address. You can check out the Books and Books Literary Foundation when you're there. And don't forget to stop by and visit us at all of our locations, Coconut Grove, Bal Harbour, and we have a shop in Key West as well. The last time I saw Dave, he was at the book fair playing with his group, the Rock Bottom Remainders. Yes, you can clap for that too. They sounded great. They sounded great at first. No, they sounded great. You haven't seen the Rock Bottom Remainders until you've seen Dave and his bondage. Oh no, that was Amy Tan. Sorry. But in this case, tonight is tonight, and Dave Gray is going to be in conversation with Leslie Lott, and she and he are going to be introduced by Liz Wilson, who is the Miami chapter president of Florida House. Let's give her a nice welcome.
All of you for being here. Welcome. I'm greatly looking forward to hearing this. Dave, I'm kind of going towards the end of my speech, but Dave is my neighbor, a very good friend, and I don't know what I would do without him putting down my garage door. Many times he does. But I'd like to tell you just a little bit about Florida House, and I promise you it's going to be short. Florida House on Capitol Hill is a nonprofit, nonpartisan 501(c) Florida organization that is the only operating state embassy in Washington, D.C., and it's been there over 50 years. We have an amazing location. We are right across the street from the Supreme Court, and amazing windows in the Florida House that look straight at the Capitol. So we have a wonderful, wonderful location there. We are a cross-section of Florida business, cultural, and philanthropic leaders who work with other influential trustees throughout the state to benefit Florida. Each year, Florida House features 4 works of varying genre written by different distinguished authors, and they are in incorporation with independent booksellers who are around the state of Florida. Tonight we are partnering with Books and Books. You stole my thunder. Anyhow, here in Coral Gables, and especially we are going to enjoy Swamp Story by Dave, and I'm greatly looking forward to it. I laughed all through it, so it's quite good. I would also like to right now, before we move on, to introduce to you Robert Weiser, who is our new executive director from Washington. I would like at this time to thank Mitchell Kaplan, Christine, Mark, and the entire Books and Books team for supporting this event, and I hope that in the future we will be working with you again. So thank you. Now it is my pleasure to introduce to you Leslie Lott, fellow Florida House trustee, who will be interviewing Dave. Leslie?
Thank you. Well, as Liz said, this is the final meeting of the Florida House Book Club for the 2024 year. And we're closing out the year with Dave Barry's novel, Swamp Story. And it is bizarre to be introducing a man that we know so well. This is, if you're like we had been, this man has shared your breakfast table pretty much every morning since 1983. We know about his family, we know his dogs, we know his vacations, his Christmas lists, his Christmas shopping list. Basically, we've sort of been reading his personal journal for years now. But there still may be some things that you don't yet know about Dave. For one thing, his column is syndicated in over 500 newspapers around the world.
It was when I wrote it
When you wrote
15 years ago.
it, well, but close enough.
Close enough,
And
yeah.
he's still world known because I was talking to a friend in Portugal, a lawyer from California who's in Portugal, was reading Swamp, this was last month, was reading Swamp Story at the time and said how much he was enjoying it. So global recognition. He won a Pulitzer Prize in 1988 for commentary. He won the Walter Cronkite Award for Excellence in Journalism in 2005. In 2013, the National Society of Newspaper Columnists awarded him their Ernie Pyle Lifetime Achievement Award. And of course, can't leave out, Florida House recognized Dave as an extraordinary Floridian with our Distinguished Author Award in 2022. So there you have it. Dave started writing in New York, in high school, I believe. Not in the city. Where were you in New York?
At Pleasantville, New York.
Oh, yeah.
Pleasantville High School.
And then you wrote in college, and then for not a Philadelphia, a Pennsylvania newspaper. Were you always writing humor?
No, when I started out, well, first of all, I want to thank Florida House for having me here, and I do think it's really appropriate that we are the only state with an embassy in Washington, D.C. We can't let that past just slide by. I mean, my church has always been, I moved here in 1986 from the United States, so it's appropriate. Anyway, to answer your question, I always wanted to be funny, you know, and I thought I was funny. Not everybody thought I was funny. You know, often, I was told by more than one teacher, because I was, believe it or not, something of a wise ass in school. And would make, you know, I was more interested in making my classmates laugh than anything else. And I was told more than once by teachers, this is a direct quote from one of them, that's very funny, but you cannot joke your way through life. Which turns out to be not true. It turns out you can, in fact, and you know, whoever that teacher is, but I mean, I always wanted to be funny. I was elected class clown, Pleasantville High School class of 1965. Thank you. And when I was in college, I wrote what I thought were funny columns for I went to Haverford College. My motto is, "We never heard of you either." I wrote. This was the 60s now, and I wrote what I thought were hilarious columns. And one of the reunions, like the 20 or 25 year reunion, somebody blew up. There was an event in the gym, and somebody had blown up my columns and put them all around the gym. And I was reading them, and I didn't get any of the jokes. And it was the 60s, if you know what I mean. So, and so that's probably why. Anyway, but when I got a job at the Daily Local News in Westchester, Pennsylvania, it was my first newspaper job. But they did not hire me to write funny. I mean, they hired me to be a reporter, and I was. Covered fires and police stuff, and wrote obituaries, and covered all these municipal meetings that are still going on. It's incredibly boring. Downtown Regional Sewage Commission, a bunch of stories that nobody would read, including me. I wouldn't even read my own story. It was so boring. But when I could, because it was a small newspaper, they would let you write other things, and I started writing humor columns there, and that's when I really got started, you know, regularly weekly humor columns. It was many years before I was getting paid to do that, but that is really where it started in the 70s.
Well, now I heard a rumor that First Lady Barbara Bush actually had something to do with your development of your career.
Not really, but I know where you're going with this question. So for many years, I would go to. I find presidential politics very funny. I don't know why we have presidential elections except to provide, you know, fodder for humor columnists. God knows nothing else comes out of it. But anyway.
Well, now you ran for president yourself.
Multiple times. I'm still running.
And I used to be considered kind of a joke. Not so much anymore. Not so much anymore. But anyway, for many years, starting in the I think 84, first time, I went to New Hampshire, and then Iowa. So, and every 4 years I go to Iowa, New Hampshire, then I go to the two conventions, political conventions. I wrote lots and lots and lots of stuff on that. It was really easy. I don't know how anybody goes to those things and writes serious things. Particularly the conventions are just so stupid. You know, it's hard to describe if you've never been to one. But so what you're talking about, the Barbara Bush thing, this was 1992. It was New Hampshire. I was in New Hampshire, and I have to write a column every day when I'm doing that. So you look at the New Hampshire, the Manchester Union Leader always would have a print everybody's schedule for the day. And, I pick one. And New Hampshire's a tiny state, so you can drive around and go to sometimes multiple events. This particular day, I went with Barbara Bush, who was then First Lady, was campaigning on behalf of George Bush, her husband, who was the president, and he ran for re-election. And so Barbara Bush, came to New Hampshire and did one of these motorcades all over the state. And I got in the press corps with her. It was like a pretty big press corps. It was like mostly big-time political reporters, Washington Post, New York Times, that kind of thing. And me, and we're in a press bus, and we're just going all over New Hampshire in a motorcade, which is the best way. If I were the President of the United States, that's all I would do. Just motorcade around. Because it's just, I would have no destination in mind. Because everybody stops for you, and you just go, and it's really wonderful. So I'm in the press bus, and we're following Mrs. Bush around, and she's going to all these events. Toward the end of the day, there's this event at some big New Hampshire Republican donor's house, big house, mansion, and a lot of people are there. And I'm just with the press corps at the side of this big room, just watching, and I'm taking notes from a little humor column. And the photographer for Mrs. Bush, I don't know why, said he wanted a picture of us, the press corps, with the First Lady. And so it kind of arranges into this semicircle in a corner. Now we're in this packed room of people. And I end up standing directly next to Barbara Bush, First Lady of the United States, who does not know me, does not know who I am. And I know better than to say anything in that situation. Just keep your mouth shut, just smile. But your brain is stupid. It's a stupid organ. There are some brain cells you have that should be just responsible for burping. And they recognize that I'm standing next to the First Lady of the United States. And we've all probably been in this situation. You're next to somebody famous, intimidating. And I said to her, really, in a loud and perky voice, I said, I shop at the same supermarket as your son, Jeb. Which was true. This was back when there was a Publix that is now something else on South Dixie Highway. And I've known Jeb a little bit, and see him at the supermarket, And this was before he became a governor. But I don't think the First Lady needs to know that. Just in the middle of this campaign, he's dying. I wonder if this guy shops at the same supermarket. So I inform her of that fascinating fact, and she goes, "Well, who gives a shit?" Not with your mouth. Not with your mouth. With your eyes. It was very clear. What she said, and then everybody's listening to this. A whole lot of people can hear this incredibly dumb conversation. And what she said was, we just celebrated Jeb's 39th birthday. Now, if you look at these two statements, I shop at the same supermarket as Jeb, we just celebrated Jeb's 39th birthday. They have nothing to do with each other except the word Jeb. Okay? Barbara Bush was a very, very gracious lady. And she was a sweet, good lady. She recognized immediately what was happening, because it happened to her all the time. The person in front of her has been reduced to blithering idiot. And just blurted out this stupid inane statement. And rather than draw attention to how stupid it was, she was bailing me out. She was socially bailing me out by making it look like we had actually had a conversation when we hadn't. I mean, how could you have a conversation about what I said to her? But that's what she was doing, and I knew that that's what she was doing. I knew that she was bailing me out. I'm thinking, like, thank you, oh, thank you. And then the part of my brain that thought that was a good idea to say that thinks, whoa, we're really hitting it off here. And I say to her, now everybody can hear this conversation, following up on the fact that I shop at the same supermarket as Jed, I said, he's very tall. I swear to you, this was my conversation with the First Lady. And of course, now she's looking around for the guy with the tranquilizer stuff thing. And it's true, Jed Bush is tall, but I think the First Lady was aware of that. And she goes, well, he didn't just grow this year. And then, thank God, the photographer took a picture and it was over. So that was my part. And years later, I was invited to Houston to the Bush's house. She has a big literacy event, and she invited me and a bunch of authors. So we get to the house, and we got George Bush meets us at the door. We walk in, and like he's starting to tell us about the rug, and she comes in the room and goes, George, they don't care about the rug. She's a very funny lady. Anyways, we ended up having a good conversation, and I told her about that. Well, exactly the story I just told here. And she goes, yeah, they used to happen to me all the time. People like that, you know. So anyway. But anyway, she was a nice lady, and I was an idiot.
Well, now you've been on The Tonight Show. You've been interviewed by Johnny Carson. And I saw you on Bill Maher.
Yeah.
And Oprah, Larry King, God knows how many other interviews. So, other than tonight, do you have a favorite interview? Or a favorite interview story?
First of all, The Tonight Show was it was the second time I was ever on television. The first time was on I had just written this little stupid book that nobody ever saw. I lived in suburban Philadelphia at the time, and I was on a local television station in Philadelphia, and I honestly don't think anybody saw that interview, including the cameraman. I mean, it's unbelievable. But somehow that fell into the hands of this woman named Shirley Wood. This is 1983, I think. This woman named Shirley Wood, who was a booker at The Tonight Show, and that was when Carson was just huge. I mean, everybody watched that show. And I get this call from this woman. She's this tough old LA broad. She smoked. I saw you on TV. I saw your book is funny. Are you funny? You know. And she asked me a bunch of questions. You know, kind of interviews me over the phone. And she never once laughed. She would ask me, "What about this? What about this?" And whenever I go, she would go, "Uh-huh," or "No." So I failed this interview, but she then booked me for The Tonight Show, and they flew me out from Philadelphia to LA, picked me up in a limo. I'd never been in a limo in my life. Bring me to the hotel and pick me up at the hotel, take me to the studio, and there's like, stars on the doors of the dressing room doors, like the Pointer Sisters, Dick Cavett, Dave Barry, and like next door, I can hear the Pointer Sisters. Like they have 300 people there, hairdressers and all kinds of entourage and everything. And I have nobody. It's just me. I don't even have. I'm wearing the clothes I flew to, anyway. But I went on. Shirley Wood came in like an hour before the show with this list of questions she had typed up. This is what she said to me. What I said back, and she said, "This is what you said. Say this." And then she took me to, there's a backstage bar, and gets me a glass like this big, fills it with wine, and goes, "Drink this." And I did. And then I went on, and it was, it was great. It was like Johnny Carson. I mean, he asked me the question, but he didn't just ask those questions. He was just really relaxed, and we'd go off on tangents, whatever. And it just seemed so easy, and everybody laughed, and it was wonderful. And I then they get in the limo, haven't even taken the makeup off, and go back to LAX and fly back to Philadelphia. I'm on the red eye with all these people thinking, none of you were on the Tonight Show. And it was like great. And I'm thinking, wow, this is easy, And then later, thousands of interviews later, I realized that was the best interview I ever had, because he was really, really good at it. Johnny Carson was really good at interviewing people, just if you want an insight from me. But, so that was good. But I've had so many, I've been on like a lot of book tours, and I've done a lot of interviews. And you will, the thing about a book tour is that you will do anything to sell your book. You're just a complete prostitute. When you write a book. And I'll give you an example. I was on a book tour. I don't even remember the book, but I'm in St. Louis, Missouri. And I get a call from my publicist saying the Oprah show is trying to get in touch with you. Call this number. So I call him. It's Oprah. It's an Oprah producer. And she goes, we're having a show tomorrow. We're thinking of having you on the panel. Now the thing is, if you're on Oprah, like the best thing is like you're the main guest, and she just talks about your book and it sells 1 trillion copies and becomes a movie. And that did not happen to me. But it's good. They have panels where they have a bunch of random people do whatever Oprah theme Oprah has. You want to do that because Oprah's going to mention your book, and that's a big deal. So I'm very like, okay, this is great. Whatever they want, I'm going to do it. And the producer says the show is going to be about righting wrongs, making things right. I can't remember specifically what it was, but it was like that, making things right. And what we're going to do is we're going to have people come on and confess to something they've done wrong, and then we'll make it right on this show. And they're like, can you think of anything you've done? So I'm racking my, and I come up with something almost immediately, which is that I had been one time at a Hyatt hotel. And there was a sign in the bathroom that said, our guest towels are 100% cotton. Should you wish to purchase a set, they're available in the gift shop for $75. And should you prefer to take the set in your room, that amount will be charged to your bill. Which is a very nice way of saying if you steal our towels and stuff, we will charge you $75. So I stole the sign. And I thought it was a funny song. So I brought it home, we put it in the guest bathroom. We had it for years. And so I tell the Oprah producer this story. And she goes, that's perfect. Okay? You will bring that sign to the show, and we'll have a give back box on the air. You will tell the story, drop that into the give back box, and we'll send it back to the Hyatt Hotel, and that'll be your story. Like, that's great, hey, okay, bye. Then I hang up and I'm like, uh-oh, because I'm in St. Louis. The show is in Chicago the next day, but the sign is here in Coral Gables, Florida. And I don't know if it's going to be able to get there in time. I call Michelle and ask him, can you FedEx it? And she's like, okay, I'll try FedEx, whatever. But I'm like thinking, what if I can't, have this sign? Will I not get on the Oprah show? And then it occurred to me, I was staying at a Hyatt hotel in St. Louis. This is a true story. So I stole another sign. And this one just said no smoking. Nobody would be able to tell, on the show. So the next day, but then they did make it. The sign from here did make it, so I returned that on the air. I still have the no smoking sign. But my point is, I was willing to lie and steal twice to get on the Oprah show. So that's what you do. That's we're applauding for that. Yeah.
All right, now to get to your novel Swamp Stories, may as well start at the very beginning. The first thing any of your alert readers are going to notice are the blurbs.
Right. Blurbs, they're like the curse of, if you write a book, blurbs are when, somebody says, this is the best book I ever read, on Theodore Dostoevsky on the back of your book. And they were like, it's just a complete fraud because you just ask your friends and they give you a book. And I've written a million blurbs and I've had people write blurbs for me, but it really is kind of a joke. But my favorite story, but Art Buchwald was a wonderful guy. Was a friend of mine, Art, and he wrote like many books. They were all basically the same book, like collection of columns. This year collection of columns. But he would get people to blurb him, and he asked Russell Baker to write a blurb, and Russell Baker, being an honest, upright person, said, I just can't do that. It's just like it's such a fraudulent thing, you know. It's just so phony. I'm not going to do it. And Art said, okay, fine. And he wrote, best book I ever read, Russell Baker. And so notes on the book. But that's kind of the level of honesty of. So anyway, when I wrote this book, I asked two people to blurb it. I asked Carl Hyacin, who's a good friend of mine, an incredibly talented, gifted writer, and I asked Steve Martin, who's also a friend of mine, and Carl read the book, wrote a very thoughtful, funny blurb. Steve didn't have time to read the book because he's Steve. He's very busy, so he wrote 5 blurbs. The last one of which is I loved it. I haven't read it, but I loved it. So I used Carl's and then all 5 of Steve's blurbs. With Steve's permission, I have to say. But anyway, blurbs are. It's funny because I am just even now going through this process. I just finished a book that's coming out in May, and had to ask a bunch of my bandmates, the Rock Bottom Remainders, to blurb that. You know, and all very nicely said they will. So, but it is like a little icky. No.
Now this is your second novel.
No.
No?
No.
Okay, correct me.
I don't know how many. There's more than 2. I mean, it's at least.
Well, 60 books? More or less?
Something like that. Yeah, but sorry, I wrote a bunch of young adult fiction with Ridley Pearson, but at least 3 novels, I think. I don't know.
Well, what was it that...
It doesn't matter.
What,
I don't know why I corrected you. It doesn't matter. Yeah. How many novels have you written, though, just for the record?
Let's move along.
Okay.
What was it that inspired you to write this book?
Well, I sometimes write nonfiction, well, although it's all lies, but we call it nonfiction because it's humor, and sometimes write fiction. And it's really more like just what I kind of feel like at the moment and what the editor thinks might be a good idea. And so I hadn't written a novel in a while, and I had an idea for a novel, and that's kind of the critical thing. I mean, it's better to have an idea before you agree to write it than to say, I'm going to write a novel and then not have an idea. So, but I did have an idea. The idea is always really Florida. I mean, Florida, there's a reason there are so many authors in this part of the world, and so many books are written about Florida, because it's just like a teeming mass of weirdness. It is. And Carl's joke is, you don't need an imagination to write novels about Florida. You just need a subscription to the newspaper. Because what happens here is just weird enough. You know, you can't make it any weirder. Like when I one of the first columns I wrote when I moved here, there was a Citizens Crime Watch meeting in Homestead, and the chief of police at the time was a guy named Kurt Ivey, and Kurt was going to go talk to this. It was an inaugural meeting of the Citizens Crime Watch forming in this neighborhood, and Kurt goes, and it's like a patio. It's something nice, so having the meeting outdoors, somebody's house, you know. And he's explaining how that crime watch works. And then out of the sky falls a 75-pound bale of cocaine into a Citizens Crime Watch meeting. And this really happened. It was front page in Miami Herald. That's how big it was. And a smuggler's plane was coming over from the Bahamas, and it was being forced down by a customs service jet. So these guys are flinging these bales of cocaine out as fast as they can. They're finally forced down on the other side of the state in Naples, which after having flung like 20 bales of cocaine out, set up a treasure hunt in the Everglades. But like my point is, you could not, if you were to write a movie where there's a scene where the chief of police is in a crime watch meeting and cocaine falls out of the sky, critics are like, come on, you know. But it happens here. That kind of thing happens here, and that's why people. I have no idea what the question is I'm answering, but that is why people write about Florida. It's just not like other places.
Well, why is? I mean, surely there are weird people in, Minnesota or Alaska. I mean, why Florida?
I don't know. I mean, it's partly it's warmer here. It's easier to get naked. But I do feel it's a little unfair. My argument is like we have 23 million residents because Florida's become a joke. Okay? Florida man, everybody mocks Florida all the time. My contention is like there are 23 million of us here. Is it fair to judge 23 million people because of the actions of 21 million? We do have a lot of weird people here. But okay, it's not always our fault. Like there's a famous story that one of the more famous Florida stories in the last decade involved. In fact, both Carl Hyacin and I independently started books with this story. He did a fictional version of it, and I did a non-fiction version. But same story. This woman was driving south on the overseas highway. She's going to Key West. Okay, she's going from Miami to Key West. Now, everything I'm about to tell you, you may remember this story because it was international news. Everything I'm about to tell you was in the Florida State Highway Patrol report on this incident that occurred. This woman's driving to Key West. She's in a hurry to get to Key West because she wants to see her boyfriend. She wants to look good for her boyfriend. So she decides to groom herself. Specifically, she decides to shave her bikini region. Now, some people would pull over to the side of the road. But she was in a hurry. Again, this is in the police report. So she decides to shave while driving and outsource the steering of the car to her passenger, who was, and this is one of the things that make this a true Florida story, her ex-husband. It's literally true. So they're going south at 40 miles an hour. She's shaving and operating the accelerator, but not looking at the road. And the steering is being done by her ex-husband. And what could possibly go wrong? The car in front of them slows down to make a turn. They slam into it at 40 miles an hour. That was the accident that was reported, and this became international news. I mean, this story was so viral. What was there not to talk? And Florida got the blame. Can you believe these idiots in Florida? We're in Florida. Like she's driving, she's shaving in Florida. That woman was from Indiana. She was shaving her Hoosier. Okay? So my point is, yeah, a lot of stuff happens here, but it isn't always us doing these things. So, but you're right. I mean, this is the epicenter of weirdness. We are like, I don't know, 7% of the population of the United States, and we produce at least 60% of the weirdness in this state.
Well, and also everybody knows that when the weirdness happens from Floridians, it's Florida man.
Right.
That does it. Right.
Oh, that was a woman, but yeah.
Did you actually create Florida man, or
Oh,
did
God,
you
no.
just make him famous?
No, I neither. I mean that. I think it got. I mean, to be honest, I think it got started with the 2000 presidential election. The idea that Florida, that we're all idiots because all the other states were able to figure out who they voted for in that election using arithmetic, and we were like weeks. Remember that weeks of like the guy looking at the hanging chads, and like look like some weasels that attack these ballots. Or like, what? So that's what I think. I really think that was when it started. The whole like everybody here down is an idiot. And nobody even knows how to punch a hole in a piece of cardboard. I proposed at the time that we make a Florida voter-proof ballot, which would be just pictures of the candidates' faces, and you would poke out your candidate's eyeball. Man, how could they screw that up?
I've got a serious question for you, and I just hate to interrupt.
All right, that's right.
But I want to know what your writing process is, because I was visiting with an author one time, and he had little bits of Post-it notes all over his study floor, and that's the way he structured his chapter.
It's a lot easier for the microphone if you hold it near your mouth.
Oh, okay. Do you want me to repeat that?
No, I heard it. I don't know if anybody else did.
That's okay. They want to hear your answer.
No, my writing process, and you talk to an author who bits a piece of paper. What I do is go find that guy's pieces of paper. And I mean, it's sort of like that, and then you write notes down, you know, when you think of something. I mean, if you're me, when you think of a joke, you write it down. But for the most part, I always tell everybody who, especially young, earnest people who want to be writers, that there is no secret at all to writing. It is not a secret. I know a whole lot of people who write for a living, and of all different levels of talent and success. And they all have, the ones who are professional writers all have the same thing in common, which is they write regularly and all the time, and they don't stop when it gets hard, because it's always hard. You know, I mean, it's not coal mining or roofing, but it's you know, it's a lot easier than being a lawyer. No, that's I don't know. I've never been a lawyer, maybe, but it's, you know, the main thing is to do it. And like what most people think about writing is like, well, I have all these thoughts in my head, and all I have to do is sit down and type, and they'll come out, and I'll have this thing. But it's really not like that. Maybe once in a while you'll know right away what you want to write, and it'll just come right out. But usually it's more like, you know, this sucks, and I'm gonna, you know, really, that's your general attitude toward what you've written. If you are a professional writer, is that you're not any good anymore, and it stinks. And if you accept that and just stop there, then you'll never be a professional writer. You'll never make a living at it. You'll never succeed at it. And if you just stay there, in maybe a day or two, maybe a week or two, before something that you consider okay happens on the screen, then you have a chance. But if you quit, if you stop, if you don't, you know, if you think it's too hard, then you'll never get there. And then when people go writer's block, I always think is really just the normal state for most writers. And it's a matter of accepting that you are facing this block, and you're going to have, either you're going to have to keep going, or you're going to have to get a useful skill to make a living, because this is, and for me, I have no useful skills. That's pretty much what I can do, and I stay there until I think it's funny.
Somebody said, and I don't remember who it was, and you might remember, somebody said that writing a book is just like reading a book.
Except the book hates you.
So that resonates with
Oh,
me.
God, every writer can totally agree with that. Right? You know, it's like, it's really not. What's fun is to be a writer. What's fun is to have written. What's fun is to be here and have all these people saying, well, you're great, you're right. What really is not fun is writing. And that's, you know.
So with Swamp Story, you touched on just about every aspect of Everglades lore. Drug runners, buried Civil War gold, bait shops, the skunk ape, the python challenge, feral hogs, alligators, gladesmen, and of course the politicians who come down to the Everglades to talk about the environment. Was there anything that you thought about, one of these things that came to you that you wanted to work into the story that just didn't quite fit?
Not really, I mean, because you named all the things that are actually in the story.
Yeah. No, I don't mean any of those things.
Oh.
Was there anything else that you wanted to put in there, or you thought about putting in the story?
Well, I didn't put like anything about the works of Marcel Proust. No, I can't. Offhand, no. But it was started with the original idea for this book was quite different from how it turned out. And it was originally it was going to be about the Python Challenge. In fact, I was going to call the book Python Challenge because I think the Python Challenge is hilarious. I mean, you guys are Floridians. I mean, you know, we have these invasive. You know, there's hundreds of thousands of them out there. These pythons. They're not supposed to be here. They're supposed to be in Burma. They're Burmese pythons, and we're going to deport them. I think that's the plan. No, they got here because people kept, these are giant and carnivorous snakes, and they came here because people kept them as pets, which I don't understand. And then eventually these people ran out of crack and realized they were living with a giant carnivorous snake. So let it go, and they love it here. They're like New Yorkers. They have no natural enemies. So they're thriving out there, and like I just love that the state, the Python Challenge idea, because it's so like charming, kind of. Let's just invite anybody who wants to come down and kill these mothers, you know. And they do. They come down, and you know they're all big fat people with beards, you know, including the women. And no, don't laugh at that. And like, but we like sanction it like as a state-sponsored event with, you know, there's a you know, and they always have this big thing every year. They python challenge. They killed like 300 of them. And meanwhile, like every single mother python has given birth to another 100. So like, they're winning the python challenge. I mean, they're killing us. But anyway, I've always thought it was funny, and I love the python challenge. I was gonna make that the centerpiece of it. And then just when I was starting the book, I had breakfast with Carl Hyacin. And he had just finished a book, and I asked, you know, oh, what's your book about? And he goes, well, it's called Squeeze Me. And I go, is it about snakes? And he goes, oh yeah, there's a lot of snakes. It was like basically all about python. So I had to completely change the plan. So it became a different book, which actually I ended up liking better, the plot that it became. But as you say, it involved Civil War treasure out in the Everglades, which allegedly there are some of anyway. And a bunch of other things, the skunk ape. I had written a book a few years ago called Best State Ever, which I went around to Florida tourist attractions, but not like the big ones like the theme parks. The old school kind of sketchy roadside attractions. And my favorite one was the Skunk Ape Research Headquarters on Route 41, Tamiami Trail. Have you ever seen it? There's like a gorilla thing outside. And there's a guy, you know, Dave Shealy, who claims to have seen the skunk ape, you know, and basically, you know, they sell t-shirts there, you know, that's the research, I think. But I spent a day with him, and I just kind of love the whole concept of, you know, these guys making a living of trying to get people to stop and buy their t-shirts. So I created a plot based around these guys in the Everglades who try to create their own version of the skunk ape, and that's sort of central to the plot. And there's a love story, and there's also a time-traveling chiropractor, which I know is kind of a cliche. I mean, who doesn't have that in a book? You know,
there were so many characters, and they kind of came in pairs and really interesting character development. Did you have favorites or favorite characters?
Yeah, I mean, there's my main favorite character is a guy named Phil, who is a drunken ex-newspaperman, alcoholic ex-newspaperman. Because I'm an ex-newspaperman, but I'm not an alcoholic. Right, Liz?
Right.
And just like when I try to represent my point of view in the story, I pick the older newspaper guy who doesn't want to have anything to do with any of these things, but he's kind of stuck in the middle of it because he's desperate for money. He ends up playing the part of this monster that they create that becomes a TikTok sensation. That was the other thing. I have a 24-year-old daughter who like lives on TikTok. I mean, she's really. I mean, I don't want to downplay her. She's a very smart person with a successful career. But she and her whole generation are very super online aware, and I was sort of interested how like the most random things can become in a matter of hours internationally famous, much bigger than anything you could create if you tried with an advertising agency, anything like that. Sort of this whole dynamic of social media. That was a big part of the plot as well. Boy, I'm sounding boring here. I apologize.
No, not at all.
Well, you almost fell asleep with it. Really mad mouth.
I'm with you. So, but one of the things that was most impressive to me, wait a minute, I gotta ask you this first. One of the first things I noticed was your really strategic use of the word supposedly.
Yeah. I had to fight because when you write anything for a publisher, they have these people who are extremely nitpicky, the copy editors. You have your editor, who is the person who takes you to lunch when you go to New York and just loves everything, and then you got the copy editors who are like look up every single thing and are always challenging you, and after a while you hate them, even though they're perfectly nice people, but you hate them because they're like challenging everything. But so I have one character who says supposedly, because a lot of people say supposedly, and this person just could not let that go. I said, no, but I know that's not a word. I know it's not right. This character is an idiot, and that's what he says. He says, supposedly. So anyway, I'm over it now.
So you won the battle.
No.
Good, because it really worked.
Thank you.
Really worked.
Thank you.
But the thing that I started to say, the most impressive thing to me about the book was the ending. I don't know what it is, but I've noticed lately that, but not all that lately, there are some books and some films that you're into the characters, you're into the story, and then it just kind of ends. It's like the writers or the directors.
Put the microphone near her.
Oh, thanks. The writers, I'm getting so excited. The writers.
See, this thing that you have in your hand, that's how they're hearing you. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So it just kind of tapers off. Kind of like my voice when I.
No, I totally hear you, and I don't want to get too far in the weeds about writing books, but you are 1,000,000% correct. I mean, I could not agree with you more. But we're like old people to say this, that books should have endings. But honestly, I've written a lot of fiction over the years, especially when I wrote young adult fiction with Whitney Pearson for years. And it's the hardest thing, one of the hardest things to do is to end a book. It's really hard to do. It's hard to make it satisfactory. But I, as a reader, I really want the book to have a satisfactory ending. I want things to happen, and then I know what they were. Especially, I want the bad guys to suffer and the good guys to succeed. But I want to at least know there was an ending. And it's a lot easier to write a book when you don't know, don't bother. You just drill along.
Yeah.
So thank you. I agree with you that I wrote a good ending.
Oh, it was great. No, it crescendoed, and then this incredible final scene.
The whole book was written around that final scene. Was like that writing to it. Like, how am I going to get there with all these people at the end? So thank you. That was what I thought.
So did you envision the ending first, and then unravel all the threads to make the story, or did it grow and build as the story developed?
Both. But I mean, when you're about like halfway through the book, you begin to realize you're going to have to land the plane at some point, and then you start thinking, or you should anyway, I think, start thinking, how am I going to weave these threads to make it look like out that way? And so, I spent a lot of time thinking about that.
Good. So it was as satisfying to write it as it was?
Yeah, when you think you've got it, like that's the ending, yeah.
Super. Okay, I'm monopolizing our guest here. Are there questions from the audience or questions from the folks following us on Instagram? Anybody? Because I've got more. I can do more. There's a question in the back.
So to your point about how you just have to read newspaper columns sometimes to write about stuff here, I started reading your books when I grew up in Texas, so I read about them and I just thought you were a hilarious writer. And then now that I've moved here, I wonder if you're a hilarious journalist. So I'm wondering what you think about your writing style, because to me some of it really, it is so journalistic. I mean, some of it you feel like it happened yesterday. You saw it happening on the road or whatever. Your characters are that accessible. So I wonder if you could speak a little to that.
Yeah, when I wrote columns, sometimes I just made everything up, just pick some weird thing and just write about it. But the ones I was most satisfied with were usually the ones like you're saying, where something actually happened, and I'm reporting on it, and my position is, you're not going to believe this, but it's true. Which is why I got well-known phrase, I'm not making this up. I didn't invent, but it has become associated with me. Like when I first came to the Miami Herald, when they first hired me, this is a random example, but I was living in Philly at the time. I hadn't moved down here yet. And I saw that there was going to be this event in New York City at the Waldorf Astoria. The French wine industry, I can't remember the name of the association, was going to hold a Sommelier of the Year competition. And I thought, maybe that could be funny. And so I applied for a press credential. I said, yeah. And the people down here, they would send me anywhere back then. Herald had money. And I rented a tuxedo, go to New York, and I attended. And it was this, giant ballroom in the Waldorf Astoria, just full of French people and wine snobs, and me. And and they had this like gigantic multi-course dinner, and they had like 10 contestants for sommelier of the year. Every one of them recommended a different wine, and we were all supposed to, to sample them all. But like the wine people were like, slosh and sniff, and I'm like, well, that's good, And anyway, I wrote about it pretty much just as it happened, and it was like, and everybody thought it was hilarious. And then I realized like all the other people were going to write about it as though something really important happened. This person chose this. Can you believe it was too woody for this mushroom dressing? And I didn't. I just thought, like, can you believe these people are just there and they say these things like, about wine? And that was sort of, for me, that was always the best kind of column. And that's why I said that I loved going to the conventions, because he just wrote what actually happens at a political convention. It's nothing like, on TV, it's like so-and-so there, lieutenant governor of whatever state is, making a speech. But actually what's happening is that this mob of people are swirling around, shouting at each other, and nothing significant is going on, except for parties outside. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make, and I'm going to get there here, is reality is usually pretty funny, and I think a lot of times journalists shield us from it or try to convert it into something meaningful and significant and intelligent, when it's usually not. It's meaningless and insane and stupid much of the time. And all I would do is say, well, look at this, what happened, and do, wow, what an imagination you have.
By the way, you mentioned Dave's columns. A lot of his columns are available online at daveberry.com, and it is so much fun to go back and read some of the columns from earlier days, because it's like a stroll down memory lane, because it's taken right out of the headlines we remember and the evening news we remember for the last couple of decades. But one of my favorites, one that I have never forgotten, I probably
We're
missed
back to you
one.
again, huh? So much for them.
Okay, so no, but I'm following up on
Okay.
this. So the Distillers effect. You wrote in 1990 about the Distillers effect.
Yeah,
It kind of says it all about mine.
You printed it out.
I did. Well, it was 1990.
Yeah, it was good. I didn't remember. Yeah, well, my point in this was a story I wrote for Tropic magazine. I called it the Distillers Effect, and it basically was named after a woman named Marie Distillers, and it was actually a tragic story. But the point is that everything that happens in Florida has a sort of weird mutant twist to it. It's never just simple and straightforward. They're just endless stories. And okay, because you printed it out for me, I'll read what I wrote about. I contend that there are more stories like this per square inch in South Florida than anywhere else in the United States. The key to enjoying yourself here is to accept this, to stop wishing it would be more like where you came from, and start enjoying the fact that the entire region is one vast entertainment medium. Every day you should wake up and say with pride in your voice, I am fortunate enough to live in the weirdest area of the United States. Are there any more questions? Before Leslie jumps in, yeah.
Any more hunts?
No, there's no more.
Oh,
Well, we used to run the Miami Herald.
Tropic hunt.
Yeah, we have to be careful how you say that. We used to run a hunt, and it was this huge, weird event. It's hard to explain. It was kind of like a combination scavenger hunt and puzzle, and we loved doing it, and it was very popular. We even did it here and in Washington, D.C. for a while, when two of my editors, Tom Schroeder and Gene Weingarten, went to the Washington Post, and the Post ran it for a few years. But it's just this massive undertaking, and you need like a lot of support, and the newspaper just isn't there anymore. I mean, like 8 people work for the Miami Herald now, so and they're busy. Yes.
In honor of Barbara Bush, I sold Jeb's house.
Does he know? Any other question? Yes.
So I am new to Florida. I will say I'm a trained.
Welcome.
We feel
My
for you.
children grew up on the books that you wrote with Ridley Pearson, with Peter and the Starcatchers, and I just wanted to get a little insight into what you guys how you developed that story, because for me, I grew up on Peter Pan, and when I started to read Peter and the Starcatchers, I said, oh, this is a must read, and I have read every one of your books to them.
Oh,
They're
thank
now 23 and 20, and they love it.
Oh, thank you. Well, she's asking about the books I wrote with Ridley Pearson, the Starcatcher series. And what happened was Ridley was here in early 2000s for the Miami Book Fair. He was staying at my house, and we're having breakfast, and he goes, we were talking about what we're working on. He says, I was reading Peter Pan to Paige, his daughter's name is Paige, and she stopped me, the original Peter Pan, J.M. Barrie, and she said, she stopped me and asked, how did Peter Pan meet Captain Hook in the first place? And he thought, I thought that would be a good idea for a book. You know, like a prequel. How come he can fly, and why is he on this island, and where does Captain Hook come from? And I go, that's like a really cool idea. You know, and he said, it's a little book, a little children's book. And he goes, well, would you be interested in writing it with me? And I go, sure. You know, like, we were both thinking little book, and we ended up writing this 500-page book. We ended up writing 5 of them. Peter and the Starcatchers, which did really well. Disney loved it. It became a Broadway play written by Rick Ellis, the guy who wrote Jersey Boys, and it was great. And we had all these Disney experiences. When you write a book for Disney, you're not just, they're not a regular publisher. We did a lot of events at Disney World, and they would do them with characters. Like we did this gigantic signing at the Disney Contemporary Resort. They built this whole pirate ship set for us, and there were thousands of people there. And they had Peter Pan and Captain Hook come, and they were behind us dueling and reading our signboard. But what I remember was before the event starts, we're in this backstage area, and it was a very small space, like a closet, and it's just me, Ridley, and Peter Pan, the guy who, from that you see in the parade at Disney World, and it's like 15 minutes. There were the 3 of us, and I'm like trying to make small talk, and I go, so how do you like working here? And he goes, it's a beautiful day in Neverland. Have you seen Wendy? Because when you're a Disney employee and you're wearing a costume, you have to be in character all the time, even in a little tiny room. We're like, no, dude, we have not seen Wendy. We're in a closet with you here. It's about long 15 minutes. We're hanging out with Peter Pan. But we had a lot of fun. We went to England for those books. We had the best time. There was a lot of fun. And it was fun writing for kids. Well, we had an event right here in this room where this man back here, Mitchell Kaplan, who is the owner of Books and Books and the beating heart of the literary community in South Florida, and probably the most beloved bookseller in the United States, if not the world. We're in this room, and Ridley and I are standing against that wall, and this whole floor is covered with kids. Living children. It sounded bad the way I said it. And we're going to read them a little segment from and we're dressed as, I'm wearing a pirate hat, and unbeknownst to us, Mitchell had hired a guy, because there's a snake in the book, and Mitchell had hired a snake wrangler, and this guy comes in with an 80-pound albino python and puts it on us, on our shoulders, and walks away. He was not 100% sober. Neither. The man, I don't know about the python. And this thing is coiling around, and we're like trying to look like this is so much fun. We're having so much fun here. Anyways, thanks a lot, Mitchell. We're over there. Anyway. In this very room. We're out of time. Okay, one more. Yes.
Since you were talking about writing with co-writing, what was the process of co-writing like, especially in contrast with writing by yourself?
I've done it with 2 people, Ridley Pearson and Alan Zweibel, who's a guy who wrote for Saturday Night Live, and he and I wrote a couple of things. But with Ridley, the process was, and this was weird to me, outlining first. Ridley knows where he's going to be for the rest of his life, you know. And I don't necessarily know how I'm going to finish this sentence. And so we outlined the book, and then we would divide it up by characters. Like, you know, he took the grown-ups and I took the kids, basically. So we did. And then you would write your, when it was a chapter with your characters doing the action, you would write that and email it to the other guy. And he could do whatever you wanted. That was the rule. And that's very different from the way a lot of people are like really picky about it. You touch my words, you have to tell me why exactly. And we didn't do that. It was like, you don't like it, change it. And then, you know, if the other guy didn't like it, he would change it back. You know, sometimes we called it ping pong. It would go back and forth and back and forth. But ultimately, we would agree on wording and then move on to the next chapter. We got more comfortable with each other's style. So anyway, that was how we did it, and it worked really well. The important thing is you have to get along really well. It's really important. Otherwise, you'll hate the other person, and that happens a lot. People end up hating each other, but not us, and not me and Leslie, right? We're still, yeah, we're like that. Well, anyway, so wasn't Leslie great? She had the
Thank you all really so much for coming. And now we truly are out of time.
And if you go to Florida House, what do you get? A free glass of?
Orange juice.
But no vodka, just orange juice.
So thank you for joining us here tonight at Books and Books in Coral Gables. And those of you who tuned in on Instagram Live, we appreciate you joining us as well. On behalf of the entire Florida House family, thank you so much to the amazing team at Books and Books and our host, Mr. Kaplan. And for our hilarious and very accomplished guest, Dave Berry. And all of you, thank you so much for spending the evening with us.